Praise the Lord. The Blazers beat the Charlotte Bobcats 124-113. The 9-25 Bobcats weren't able to get it done against the Blazers unbelievably. In that first half, it looked a little scary. But in the second half, the Blazers put it together. Jeremy Grant, fantastic game, 32 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 12 of 19 shooting, 4 of 6 from three. Yusuf Nurkic, an awesome game, 28 points, 15 rebounds, 6 assists, lighting it up from 3-point range. Looked like Dame Dollar out there, 5 of 7 from downtown. Damian struggled, did not play very well. He was 1 of 10 from three, 17 points, but distributed fairly nicely, 9 assists, but 5 turnovers to go along with that. And the Blazers were able to pull out the win in Portland tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it was truly a tale of two halves. We've seen this before, and of course, it happens in sports all the time, but this was a blatant example of it. The first half looked like the road trip. It was no communication, turnovers, bad defense, no defense. And it really just looked like our two games against OKC. It was bad basketball being played by two bad teams. And that's not what I want to see the Blazers. That's not the world I want to see the Blazers in. So that was a really disappointing start. And at halftime, I had kind of that despair in my heart again of like, it felt like they were toying with us. You know, like it just didn't feel like we had a chance, which is kind of how the whole road trip felt, right? Like, or most of it. It felt like even when we were close, 6, 7, 8 points down, it didn't, there was no chance. Like it was only a matter of time because we couldn't play any defense and we couldn't stop them. Second half, things started to look a lot different. I felt like the Blazers, I wouldn't say they slowed things down, but they started moving the ball a little bit better on the off, like in offensive sets. They were getting down, getting into their spots, and it seemed like they actually had a plan instead of either trying to run a fast break or trying to play ISO. And it started to really work. I mean, Nurkic was on fire, not only shooting, but his passing. He had some absolute dimes. They started to play some defense, which I think is what really made the difference. And it was enough to get it done. It's not a huge celebration to say, you know, well, the Bobcats, we were able to fend them off in Moda Center on Damian Lillard night. It should have been a foregone conclusion, but I'll take it.
Credit where credit's due. The Blazers got the win, right? I mean, wins are all that matters, and it was an 11-point win. It wasn't a buzzer beater win, but wow, the first half against a Hornets team that is really undermanned and just has a lot of lack of skilled players in general, you know, outside of a couple standouts with LaMelo Ball. And man, the first half had me sitting here in the blow up bunker saying, what is happening with the defense? Like, it's just as usual. I agree. The second half, they played a lot harder. The fourth quarter, they played some pretty good defense. I go down the line of the plus minus. I know that single game plus minus is not something to always kind of look at. So a lot of the starters were major positives. We got Grant plus 12, Nurkic plus 20, Lillard plus 21, Hart plus 18. Shout out to Josh Hart. He had 14 rebounds again.
He's our best rebounder at 6'6", 6'5".
Man. Yeah, he's just an animal on the boards and hustle. And then we got Simons at plus 4. At halftime, Simons had, I believe it was something like 12 points or something, but 0 assists, 0 rebounds. I don't want to keep harping on Simons, but he's only a plus 4, and those stretches those stretches where he's the primary initiator of the offense, you know, and everything. I've harped on that enough, but it's just something to keep an eye on.
Harp away.
Well, it's just something to keep an eye on, you know.
Yeah.
Nurkic, you can't find fault with his game today. He was carrying a lot of time. Grant as well. I mean, obviously, I think Grant should be getting maybe even more shots than he's gotten most of this season. He's been an efficient scorer. Dame, you know what? he can have a bad game here and there, and I'm not worried about him. You know, it was the Dame night. He first game back after breaking the points record. You know, whatever. There's emotions, I'm sure, in his head, and he still had 9 assists. And yeah, he had turnovers, but you know, people are bringing other stuff to the table. You got to be a multifaceted player. You can't bring one thing to the table unless you're absurdly good at it. The bench, the bench is a little concerning, and I think that there's room for improvement. And I know that Winslow's out, but you know, you go down the line of the bench, and you know, Keon I think has been playing great,
Yeah.
and you know, he brings the defense and the energy. He wasn't hitting his threes tonight, but that's okay. Eubanks, you know, the single game plus minus again, but he was a -9, and Sharp was a -8 in 7 minutes. You know, with you know just a rebound out there. So, you know, the bench is a little rough right now, and that I think is there's some room for improvement there. And I do think that with another ball handler and somewhere that could help people get easier shots, the bench wouldn't struggle as much. I think that that's a major part of the problem.
Looking at his stats, Damian Lillard hasn't taken any kind of step back. He's averaged in his last in the month of December, he's averaging 29.9 points, 7.2 assists, 3 turnovers, 47% from the field, 44% from three. But just looking at him the last few games since that road trip, just the eye test for me, it looks like he's regressing back to how he played a few years ago when he just didn't trust his teammates. It seems like he's taking a lot of hard shots. He's dribbling a lot, doing the step back shots. He's just making the game hard for himself, which, I mean, fair play. That might be what he has to do. It's what he's definitely been used to his whole career. But the team is much better when he's a more willing, it's not even passer. He passes the ball, but just not having to make every play, not taking every tough shot, like passing up maybe the open step back three for something that might open up later down the possession. So that worries me a little bit. It seems like it's been a trend in Lillard's career where if he's not red hot, you know, hitting 10 threes a game and just knocking down every step back three, he really does kind of struggle with being the facilitator on a team to a really high level where he's getting his other players going and playing really well for long stretches of time. But like you said, it's not like I'm worried about him necessarily from a personal play standpoint. It just concerns me a little bit that he's never really been the best at getting like you know his teammates to be playing at a superstar level, which again might not be his fault necessarily. It might be more the GM's fault. But I mean, he has talent around him right now, and some of those guys like Jeremy Grant has kind of struggled a little bit the last few games. Nurkic, you know, hasn't played amazing. Obviously, there's ups and downs in a season, and maybe they'll come out of it. But I hope to see more of Lillard just not playing the hero ball. I mean, that's the term that we've been using for years for him, just bailing out the team with tough step back shots. It's not what I want to see from him. I mean, it's fun to watch it when it works, but it is really kind of painful to watch when it's not working. And you mentioned Nurkic had a great game. Who was he playing against? Mark Williams, Mason Plumlee. Like he was that's just the typical Nurk. That's been his entire career. Nurkic plays amazing against scrub centers. And then when he gets matched up against Jokic, it's you know 6 quick fouls, which again, Jokic is a 2-time MVP. There's a reason for it. But yeah, Nurkic, he plays amazing when we don't need him, or you know, when the center isn't the problem on the team, and he is always struggles against the great centers in the NBA.
My hope and the optimist in me is saying that all of these guys who we're talking about, Nurkic, Grant, Dame, they all looked pretty good early in the year. And then we hit a really rough patch, a couple tough road trips, some injuries. And my hope is that maybe tonight, even though we were playing the Bobcats, I'm going to keep calling them the Bobcats, and even though it's maybe not that
Tell me the difference between the Bobcats and the Hornets. That's all I want to know. What's the difference between them? There's no difference.
2 or 3 years, I think, is the difference. But
no difference.
my hope, even though this win isn't that impressive on its own on paper, yeah, Nurk was playing against someone he should be able to beat up on. It still maybe will refresh their memory about what was working early on in the season. Some of that ball movement that we started to see in the second half of this game that we haven't seen in 10 games, it was working in the second half. It took them from a 6 or 8 point deficit to a 13-point lead in a quarter because they were moving the ball, they were trusting each other, they were playing defense, they were communicating on defense, they were getting steals that were leading to fast opportunities. They weren't just taking the hardest first shot that they found, they were continuing to let the play develop. And just trusting each other, including guys who maybe aren't usually the recipient of a three, like Nurkic. He's a professional basketball player. He can put it down if he's the wide open guy at the end of the play. So my hope is just that they saw what worked. They're going to look at film just like we do, and more than we do, and that it could lead to some continued success.
My hope, and Riley, you kind of touched on it at the end, is Kirby, you brought up the fact that Nurkic struggles against those imposing centers. We know he's not a good scorer in the paint. He's just not a good scorer in the paint. If he's found a new weapon with the 3-point shot, because I keep waiting for it to stop working, but this season it has worked. She's shooting like 45%. Yeah, it's a lower sample size, but when is it going to stop being a low sample size? I mean, he was 5 for 5 before he took some late, in the game threes. Yeah. So, I mean, 5 for 5 is not all lucky in an NBA game, I don't think. So, if he can start dragging bigs out of the paint and actually like providing that flex on offense, especially when he can play make, like kind of throw it down on the high low, that can cause some matchups that we haven't seen in the past, some matchup problems for the other team. Because when they know that they can just bite down on Nurkic's weird little stagger step flop layup from like 3 feet away from the rim, that's different than if he can actually spread the floor and provide that kind of a threat in a different way. So I'm hopeful if Nurkic is the move as the season goes on, which I'm okay with moving him for the right move, but if that's the move, if we got to keep him for now, hopefully this 3-point thing is actually for real, because that can help out down the line in the playoffs. Your Damian Lillard point, Kirby, I agree with you, but I also think that, again, this speaks to the lack of other creators on the team, playmakers. I think throughout Damian's career, he's never
the
had
only
a
one.
playmaker. Yes.
He's the only one right now. It's either him or 20 Anthony Simons dribbles in a tough fadeaway jumper.
Exactly. So he has to, when the offense isn't going, like Jeremy Grant is a play finisher.
Yeah.
And he's a good play finisher, but he's not a play creator. And when Dame has to be the play creator every game, every time, and he gets trapped up top, double teamed, and he's like, all right, I just need to shoot because my guys are not going to be able to create a shot. I don't blame him as much for that, Yeah. Yes, sometimes the heat check threes when he's cold are annoying, definitely. But you laid out his stats. I mean, throughout the year in December, like he's still doing his job of scoring efficiently, and you saw it in the Oklahoma City game where he had an efficient 38 or whatever and 9 assists and 7 rebounds and was shooting efficiently and not bad shots. And the team around him couldn't do anything and we lost. That's the kind of things that it's tough to overcome for Dame. And then you go into another game and you're still the only playmaker and you got to create a lot of the offense. He's going to have nights like that. So yes, it's frustrating, and I agree with you. And if the offense is rolling, we don't want hero ball at all. But I'm hopeful somewhere or the other we can get some playmaking to help relieve some of the pressure, and then hopefully he can take a back seat and hit more of those off-ball threes we've been seeing.
Yeah. He's had some killer turnovers the past few games too.
Yeah.
Just turnovers that really take away a lot of the momentum. But like you said, it's in situations where he's being like hounded by about 3 guys, and it's like we desperately need a bucket in that situation. It's not like we have any breathing room. He knows that if it's a turnover, it's like gonna break the team's back or whatever. So he's just put in an impossible situation a lot of the times. But it would be nice to. I don't know. I don't really know if the team deserves his trust, but it would be nice to see a little bit more faith in his team.
Right.
Like, just like try to get Jeremy Grant a little bit more involved at times. Maybe try to get Nurkic involved a little bit more. But it's kind of wishy-washy a little bit because who knows if those guys would even pay off. But it feels like kind of one of those future investment sort of things. It's like the more faith you put in your teammates to make those plays, they'll probably have more confidence to make them down the stretch.
And I think there has been semblances of that. In past seasons, Dame would have tried to shoot every game winner we've had. And he's given up multiple. I know it's not all about game winners. I'm just saying he's shown trust in those guys.
That's something I'm kind of a point to what I've been talking about that I've noticed is like he in the early part of the season, it was like he was being used as a decoy, and Jeremy Grant and Anthony Simons and those guys were hitting the big shots. But lately, it seemed like it's kind of regressed back to him taking tough, multi-contested shots that sometimes we don't even get a look. Sometimes it's like a turnover. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So
get him a playmaker.
So early in the year, we were talking about Josh Hart and Winslow and maybe even Watford as potential playmakers, and that just has not materialized. So, what does that mean? Does that mean that I guess what I'm saying is that they went out and they got some other potential playmakers for Dame so that he wouldn't have to take the ball up the floor every time and make every play, and it just isn't working. So why can't Josh Hart bring the ball up the floor? Is it just because he's too out of control? Because he's trying to play this insanely aggressive defense, dive on the floor? You can't dive on the floor when you're supposed to facilitate the play. And so, maybe it's just that the personnel that we brought in that were supposed to be facilitators, it's just not enough. I mean,
we just have no backup point guard. That's really the issue. None of those guys were meant to be point guards, and a lot of people were saying, like, I remember we said it at the beginning of the season, like, we don't need a backup point guard. We got all these like great ball handlers or whatever, and Dame doesn't really need a backup. But I think it's kind of coming to the point where it's pretty obvious that he does need one. We need another true point guard, ball handler, a guy who can orchestrate the pick and roll, who can get his own shot, get to the rim, hit, tough shots like Dame does, but just kind of a lesser version of that, like a Tyus Jones or something like that.
TJ McConnell, something like that. Like, honestly, I remember there was a quote from Josh Hart. I think it was end of last season. He said, "You guys are going to see me with the ball in my hands a lot more next season." And we have not seen that, if like any at all this year. So I don't know. I mean, because Hart last year was showing signs of becoming a playmaker, and Simons was a little bit too. But yeah, you're right. We haven't seen that materialize, and I agree. I just think it's time to get somebody who's going to be that pure point that runs the offense. It doesn't have to be a Damian Lillard level player. It doesn't have to be a superstar wing, even though I want a superstar wing, of course, like everyone. Just get a guy that can keep the offense running. And then when your offense doesn't stagnate and lead to long rebounds that the opposing team can snag and get fast breaks, then you can set your defense. It just helps everything out. So that's a thing that I definitely think that they need to look at, and we've talked about it. I've talked about it enough.
Little bit of a break for the Blazers coming up. They play next on Friday, it looks like, against the Warriors, defending champs. We're going to the Bay Area to play them. Probably no Steph Curry still, but that could be a tough game. They played the Grizzlies really good yesterday on Christmas, so that'll be an interesting one to watch. Thanks for tuning in to watch our post-game reactions. Sorry to Mike Barrett, we ran out of time. See you guys later.
Bye.